You don't need a lot of tools in the kitchen. Knives, I'm going to suggest having one chef's knife and one paring knife. That's most often what I use. So I like to make my food pretty. If you have time to do that, that's great. If you don't, peel your fruit with your hands and separate it by segments and throw that in and make a salad out of that. But in an effort to make my food pretty, I'm going to take my chef's knife and I'm going to cut off the end, either end of the fruit. And then that white pith you see there, that is really bitter. So I'm going to cut off most of that, if I am able. Try to reduce the bitterness in our salad, citrus salad. And it's just going to make it so that the presentation of the salad is a little bit prettier. It's not going to change the way the salad tastes. So all of this scrap, by the way, I've recently gotten a compost service, which has made me feel so much better about the amount of food waste that I create. I used to try to compost on my own. I wasn't very good at it, kind of like with the gardening. So instead I pay a fee a month to have a bucket brought to me, and I get to put all of these scraps into that bucket. And they compost it, and then twice a year, they give me the option of taking my compost back or donating it to someplace that can use it for local gardening. And I'm gonna plan on taking it back because I'm gonna put it in my own garden. So you'll see I'm cutting off the majority of the pith. Okay, now that I have it like this, I have two choices with what to do with this piece of fruit. I can either cut it into what's called supremes, where I slice it along the lines of the membrane and then pull the segment out. That's an option. What I'm actually gonna do for this, because I think it looks prettier, you can do that for these. You can do different things for each piece of fruit you use. I'm actually gonna cut it into little wheels. The reason I'm gonna do that is because it makes this lovely little wheel. It looks really pretty on a plate, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna peel this grapefruit instead of slicing off the pith like I did with the orange. This is an Oro Blanco grapefruit. Again, this came from Farm Fresh Las Vegas. So it's from Southern California locally. It's actually an itty bitty grapefruit inside a lot of appeal. By the way, guys, I put on a shirt and pants for you instead of wearing sweats like I do all day for this video. So I feel special. And I'm wasting these peels right now, but you can use these peels for other things. You can add them to white vinegar and you can clean with it. Makes it smell really nice and fresh. You can put parts of it down the garbage disposal and it'll help naturally clean the garbage disposal. So there are other uses for this if you want to use them. I also like to candy citrus peels, so I do that sometimes with some of the citrus I get. Okay, and then I'm gonna slice this into wheels. So once we have all this fruit sliced, we're actually going to finish the salad with a little bit of chopped nuts. And you can use any nuts you want. We're using pistachios, that's what I have in my pantry. You can also use roasted almonds. You can use walnuts, anytime you want. By the way, all of the produce we're using this evening is in season. We're very lucky we have long seasons here in Las Vegas. The purpose of using it in season is twofold. Number one, it's always cheaper to eat fruits and vegetables that are in season because they're going to be less expensive at that time, whether you're buying them from a grocery or buying them from someplace local. Additionally, the food that you're going to be eating is more nutritious because it is not being forced to grow out of its own season. It's growing in its optimal environment, so it's going to have more nutrition to it. Now I'm just running a blade roughly through some pistachios. This is going to go on top of the salad. Nuts are a really good healthy fat, but you don't want to eat a whole bunch of them because they're very calorie dense. So this is just going to add some flavor. It adds some healthy fat and adds some color to the dish and makes it taste good. So we have our finished citrus salad here. You'll notice during this process, we did not cook anything. I like to, in my brain, I categorize things by algorithms. I've never been to culinary school, don't know anything about that. I have a degree in chemistry though, and so I like to separate food down into two different categories. We physically change things or we chemically change them. When we cook food, we chemically change it. When we just change the physical appearance of it, we don't chemically change it by cooking it, and we actually maintain a lot of the nutrition because of it. So this was a dish that we created entirely by physically changing our ingredients. Yep. Please excuse any food particles you see anywhere. This is a pandemic. We have been eating lots of ramen noodles. So right now I'm adding farro couscous to water. I'm gonna give it a zhuzh. Normally you wanna salt food at the end because the larger the particles of salt, the more you taste it. However, when you're making pasta or any kind of grain, you do wanna salt the water as you're cooking. We're gonna turn the heat off on this. We're gonna set this aside. That's gonna soak up most of that liquid. I'm following the directions on the package for the couscous I'm using. You can use any kind of grain you want, even if that's rice, even if it's millet or buckwheat, anything you would like. We're just making a warm grain salad, so that works perfect. So I am prepping the vegetables to put into our warm grain salad. Right now, I'm using one of the Imperfect Foods zucchinis, and I said it was a couple weeks old. So I'm trimming out a little bad spot on it. That's what the paring knife's for. I'm gonna switch back to my chef's knife and just make rounds of it. It's funny, cooking really does come down to science and a little bit of math, and that includes geometry. Ideally, when you're cooking anything that's a vegetable, a grain, whatever, you want to keep it uniform in size. Also, keeping it uniform in size kind of makes it look prettier when you're serving it. So right now I'm trying to keep my zucchini slices as uniform as I can. I'm going to blade through that. Okay, I'll set those to the side here. I'm going to eat the little bits that I made not uniform size. I'm fishing the kale out of the vinegar. It's a lot softer now. I'm just gonna run a blade through that too. Okay. Those are all gonna be going into the same dish, so I'm gonna throw them back into the same bowl, save myself a dish so I don't have to separate out the zucchini. This is a little bit of parsley I picked from a pot over here. I used to kill all my herbs until I started watering them with the dog water that I threw out each morning when I freshened the dog's water. Like obviously this has been rinsed and clean. I'm just gonna run a blade through those. Those are gonna get added in as well. When you're, again, principles, you can use any herb you want. When you're chopping up herbs, ideally what you wanna do, same thing with lettuces or leafy green vegetables of any sort, you wanna roll them up so that they're a small bundle, and then run your blade through them. Toss that over here. That'll get added to our grain once it's done cooking. So when I was a kid growing up in small town Indiana, when you went into a restaurant, they offered you ranch and French and oil and vinegar for your salad. And I always thought oil and vinegar, how boring. That's really weird. It's a weird thing to offer. Actually, oil and vinegar are amazing. They have 100,000 different combinations. You can use any kind of acid in combination with vinegar and make a really, really refreshing and novel vinaigrette. So I'm gonna teach you the principles of how to do that rather than how to make one specific vinaigrette. Most people start with shallots. I don't love starting with shallots or onions or garlic when they're making a vinaigrette. Instead, I tend to just start with the acid itself. So tonight we're gonna make a balsamic vinaigrette. I'm gonna pour 1 portion of acid, which is our vinegar. Again, you can also use fruit juice like orange juice. You can use lemon juice, but I'm gonna pour 1 portion of our vinegar for every 3 portions of our fat. What you're doing when you're making a vinaigrette is you are making an emulsion. In order for that emulsion, which basically means a thickened liquid where the acid is suspended within the fat, you have to have a certain proportion, and that proportion is 1 to 3. So 1 portion of fat, 1 portion of acid for every 3 portions of fat. That also includes if you're making a bacon vinaigrette, you're using bacon fat, any kind of fat you're using, so oils, fats. I just added a little bit of balsamic and a little bit of Dijon mustard. There's about a teaspoon or so of Dijon mustard in there. To that, I'm going to add some black pepper. I like to freshly grind mine, it keeps it fresher. You don't have to do that. You can just use pre-ground. A little bit of salt, a little sprinkle of salt in there. Okay. I'm gonna show you that I'm portioning out teaspoons. So ideally when you're making a vinaigrette, if you're able to, you can use a fork or a whisk. I'm gonna use a whisk. It's easier for me to use, but you can also use a fork. Right now I'm just showing you what a tablespoon of olive oil looks like in this bowl. So that's what a tablespoon of olive oil looks like. The reason I'm doing that is because I usually freehand it. So you see me whisking, you see how it's stirring it together and it's starting to get a little bit thicker. So that's 1 portion. We need to add 2 more portions. By the end of all this, we're gonna have a little over 1/4 cup of dressing, which is about 2 tablespoons of dressing. And serve between 2 people, that's about a serving of salad dressing. That's about right there. Do you see how the vinegar is suspended within the dressing? It makes it a thickened liquid. You can see it kind of come up on the side. Leave that sitting and it'll separate, just like your bottle of salad dressing separates in the refrigerator. You just shake it up or whisk it back together when that happens. But this is what we call an emulsion. Right now I'm fluffing our couscous. Once that's absorbed all that water, the grains need to be separated. So fluffing it right now with a fork. And then I'm gonna dump it along with the vegetables into our vinaigrette that we just made. Most of that vinaigrette is gonna get soaked up by this couscous. Again, this is a farro couscous that's made with a grain that is higher in protein and fiber than the usual couscous, which is the semolina couscous. Like I said, carbohydrates aren't the enemy. It kind of depends on how you eat them. So this is actually 1 serving of carbohydrate, 1 serving of couscous. And I'm adding more vegetables to it to widen it out so that I'm getting vitamins, minerals, flavor in combination with that fat, fiber, and carbohydrate. I'm just gonna stir this through. I'll stir it through again once we get closer to time to eat it. And the goal is to separate out those grains so they're not all lumped together. If you leave them together, they'll stay together and lump and not be nearly as pretty. So this is our couscous in combination with a rescued zucchini, a little bit of kale that we softened with some vinegar and picked from the garden, and some parsley from my flower pot in the kitchen. And there you go. You can add any combination of vegetables you have to this. We love to make it with cucumber and tomato. We also like to make it with apple because it adds a little bit of sweetness to that sour, acidic, and savory flavor. You can also add dill, you can add tarragon, you can add, I don't suggest rosemary. Rosemary is kind of a tough herb, but thyme, any of those savory herbs you can add as well. So we're gonna set this aside. This is warm right now. It's gonna cool a little bit and soak up all the vinaigrette flavor. So